So I always knew that I wanted to be a scientist, but I didn't know what economics was. I didn't know what economics was until I got to college. There are many fields that you don't know until you get to college. You know, it's hard to teach philosophy or religion or economics to high school students. I mean, we do a very good job teaching complicated sciences, but we don't do a very good job teaching complicated subjects that concern interactions of societies and people and politics. And that's what you learn when you're in college. So when I was a child, I knew I wanted to do something in science. I didn't know a lot about science, but when I got to Bronx High School of Science, I discovered the wonders of what goes on under a microscope. And I decided that I wanted to study bacteria. And that's when I went to college. I went to college to do bacteriology. But I wasn't even informed sufficiently about about what was happening in genetics and in the science of the cell. And so I don't think I got the best information from people at the time, but it didn't matter really in the long run. Well, when I went to Cornell, I entered to do bacteriology, and then I transferred to the Faculty of Arts and Sciences to pursue just about anything that I wanted to pursue. And I took courses in many, many different subjects. And then when I hit upon economics, it wasn't simply economics, it was a person. It was Alfred Kahn, who was someone who was passionate about the field of economics and explained it to me in a way that I could understand and truly appreciate as being a subject in which there were a multiplicity of forces that also brought you eventually back to an equilibrium. And so it was a subject that was highly mathematical, that appealed to me. His field happened to be industrial organization and the theory of regulation. And so actually when I was in college, most of the economics that I studied was in fields that I do not pursue now, although I think of myself as a very generalist economist, because as an economic historian, I have to be open to just about any type of economics that will work and fit and be relevant to the subject and the period that I'm studying. But when I was in college, in fact, I was working in the field of industrial organization, which is the theory of product markets. And when I went to graduate school, I went to the University of Chicago because that's where some of the great minds in industrial organization and in law and economics were. Well, the role models and mentors that I have had have all been individuals who have been passionate about their subject. So beginning, as I said, with Alfred Kahn, who is known as Fred Kahn, he was passionate about regulation. In fact, he served as the head of the Civil Aeronautics Board in America, and he deregulated the airlines, and that was effectively getting rid of the Civil Aeronautics Board. So probably in the history of heads of agencies, he may be one of a very few number of people who actually dissolved the agency that he was the head of. And that deregulated the airline prices and brought down airline prices in America and led to the formation of many airlines that we no longer have, but that were very small airlines, such as People's Airlines. When I went to Chicago, I was fortunate enough to have a large number of extraordinary mentors and people who mentored because they were passionate about their subjects. And Gary Becker, for example, was one of the individuals. Um, Robert Fogel was another one of the individuals. And these are the people who, in some sense, guided me more and more towards away from industrial organization, towards labor economics, and towards economic history. Although I must say that they would not have been unhappy if I studied industrial organization as well. Well, I don't think that I could survive without such a curiosity. We just had a wonderful lunch in which we started talking about the history of cooking and the history of food and why it is that certain countries have hard bread and certain countries have softer bread, and what is it about the milling of wheat and the use of water power versus wind power. That was just at lunch. And I started thinking about other issues in culinary history. I don't necessarily do culinary history, but in some sense we all do culinary history. And so it's simply a questioning about every single thing that we do and we think about. And the beauty of being an academic is that we can pursue any part of it. And the beauty of having wonderful students, as I have, and I have had for, all the years I've been teaching, is that I can mention these to my students and have conversations, and maybe they will pursue it as one of the essays that they will write, or maybe even a book one day. And I do have a student right now who's working on certain aspects of culinary history. I don't want to say I was born with it, because that will be discouraging to certain people who will say, was I born with it? I think that it's something that you feel as you're walking around our complicated world, listening to news, thinking about people you don't know and their travails or their happinesses, that you want to know more about them. You want to know more about their history. You want to know more about their countries. You want to know more about the history of that. And this sort of adds and becomes much, much larger. Well, it was celebrated by, I remember we went to a press conference at Harvard. So my husband, Larry, one of our students, Dev, came over that morning, and our dog, Pica, and we all walked to 1 Brattle Street to the press conference, and all of us went to the press conference, and then we walked from the press conference up to Lit Tower, where our offices are. We walked up the steps, and I was greeted by, I don't know, 150 students and faculty, and it was a beautiful day. It was a gorgeous day. It was October 9th, and the sun was shining, and the sky was as blue as it could be over the gorgeous buildings at Harvard and the steeples. And it was a lovely celebration of being with students and faculty. Of course, it was saddened by the war in which at the time wasn't necessarily a war, but the capture of hostages of Israelis. And so that really saddened it terribly. So it was a bit of a mixture. I tried to feel a celebration, but I also felt a certain amount of pain. Well, that's going to be my little 2-minute. My first reaction was that I had to do something very quickly. We had an hour and a half to get up and get ready for the announcement. And so it meant that we had to take the dog out, and we had to make a little breakfast, and we had to take showers. And I had to think hard about, a long part of my life's work, and write something up and think about what I would say and all the people I would want to thank. And so I sat down and we did all of that, and then I sat down and 6 o'clock came, and I realized that something that I hadn't thought would happen is that emails just started piling up in my only account. It's not as if I had a private account and a public account. And I knew that I had to work through these emails to find the ones that I needed. The ones I needed, for example, from the Nobel Foundation, from close relatives, from close friends. And then I realized that it wasn't 100 emails. In a very, very short period, it became almost 1,000. And we went to the press conference and then came back. And I started reading them, thinking, how am I going to work through all of these? I needed something special, some superpowers. And as I was reading them, I realized that many of them started out with the phrase, I cried. It started out with, I am so joyful. And these were statements of people, of course, I didn't know, who felt that I had made their work validated. I had uplifted them. I gave them pride in who they were. And through these many joyful and jubilant emails, I found the strength that I needed to read all the rest. So it was, for me, it was an award that was clearly given to me, but I felt that it had been magnified thousands of times over by what I was hearing in these emails. It's a very interesting question and would have to be answered on many levels. On one level, there's been collaboration in many types of science. We can hear our friends in chemistry and physics, particularly in the biological sciences, or thinking about the Higgs boson, for example, which was a collaboration of hundreds and hundreds of people, where we have science that is made up of so many multiple things that are needed. Economics had been different. It had been the way science was once done, where one person would strike out and do something themselves. I think, for example, of Bob Fogel and Gary Becker that we were just talking about. Economics now is far more collaborative. It's rare that someone will write an article by themselves or write a book by themselves. I have done a bit of that, but I also work collaboratively. And when I first began working collaboratively, there were very few women to work with. And so most of my early collaborations are with men, and one with someone who is brilliant and insightful, and also my husband, and that's Larry Katz. And I love working with Larry Katz. But now I also work with women, Claudia Goldin, who will be coming tomorrow or the next day. And so I have finally been able to work with women. I wrote an important paper with Cecilia Rouse, for example. And it's wonderful working with smart, intelligent, collaborative people, but working with women also adds another element. I will say I have never brought a dog into an archive. So even though the dog looks like in the graphic it's in the archive, the dog has never been in the archive. So when I grew up, I had no pets. And I lived in the Bronx in New York, and I didn't know anything about dogs. And so my first dog was when I was in graduate school. So that's pretty late for most people. And she was a phenomenal animal. Her name was Kelso. But I didn't have that much time to do very serious training with her. And later, I've really only had 3 dogs. And so thank goodness 2 of them have lasted a very long time. And Pika is 13 now, and I hope he will be with us for a couple more years. And I started doing competitive work with dogs. And Pika happens to be an incredible center, meaning whenever I say center, it sounds like it's a football player. I love training the dog. I love getting to know the dog, getting deep into the mind of something that we really do not understand, of course. But in addition, the dog is companionship. And finally, it brings me to another group of people, my dog friends, the people I train with, the people I track with, the people I go scenting with, the people I train with in terms of obedience. And just like any sport, it brings you to a different, wonderful group of people. It's very simple. Follow your passions. If you've gotten involved in this subject, there are questions that you have. And those are going to be your passions, and just keep on following them. And don't think that you will easily find an answer, that sometimes going about and looking for description, understanding what happened, understanding its history, understanding how it impacted people, even talking to people, can help you a lot. And our students today are obsessed with finding the best causal identification. That's sometimes difficult. It may be the gold standard. It may be exactly what we want, but it may not always be attainable right then and there. And it may be that you're asking the wrong question until you observe. But if you keep the passion, to answer the question, you'll do very well. You just keep on going. I mean, some of the biggest failures I have had are funny stories. Okay, they become really funny. And the biggest failures are when I thought I was after some important set of documents, and I found that I couldn't get the documents. But sometimes it's taken me to a place on Staten Island, which was supposed to have a set of documents from Citibank. And it was one of these Iron Man facilities in which Citibank gives over its information every day to this place. And they cart it away, and they put it in boxes. And eventually they destroy what's in some of the boxes. But some of the boxes are supposed to be kept indefinitely. And I was after those types of boxes. And not to get into the immense amount of difficulty I had, but I was coming with a letter from the CEO of Citibank to this Iron Man facility, and I walk in with this letter, and the person looks at me like, I have no idea what you're here for. And I'm looking up at the largest amount of boxes I have ever seen. It was something from, some movie about hell on earth, just gigantic amounts of boxes. And we checked through many of them. For this person to pull the boxes, the person actually had to be on a cherry picker. That's how many boxes there were, and the potential difficulties of getting them down. So no, I never found what I was after and wasted several days, but that's what happens. Sure, I don't think I ever felt alone because one always has other friends, other women friends. In part, one feels alone because there are moments when you feel that there are clubs and that you're not necessarily a part of the club. But I don't think that I felt terribly much alone. Yeah. And maybe that's because going to Bronx High School of Science was, as an institution at the time, was disproportionately male. And so I didn't feel very much alone. You know, just like when I was a graduate student and all of the fields were mainly male fields, today it is the case in economics that some of the subdisciplines are more made up of more women than others. And it would be very nice if more women became macroeconomists and econometricians, because we need you there. There are two aspects of this. One is, why don't we get diversity? And the other one, what is the role of diversity? And I have dealt a lot with the first one. I can say a little bit about the second. Men and women often look at disciplines like economics slightly differently. And occasionally they're both wrong. So in my work on undergraduate women in economics and trying to figure out why economics isn't doing as great a job as many other disciplines, despite the fact that women are just as good at math as men, and economics is a very math-intensive subject, more than the biological sciences, for example, possibly more than chemistry is, not necessarily more than physics is. I thought about, this was several years ago, why it is, and realized that many individuals are making this decision before they even go to college. And many of the reasons why they're making these decisions is what gets discussed at the breakfast table with their parents and what they read in the New York Times, the Wall Street Journal, the Washington Post, or whatever newspaper or social media they're reading. And economics, to many people, looks like finance. But it's not finance. Finance may be a part of economics, but economics is not finance. And so many of the young men, when they go to college and they're asked before they go to college in the summer, what would you like to major in? Give me 3 subjects, and they'll put economics down as one, and you'll ask them why. They'll say, because economics is finance and I want to go into finance. And if you ask the women, why didn't you put down economics? They'll say, because economics is finance and I don't want to go into finance. And both of them are wrong. And they should both go into economics because of what economics is and not what economics is not. And so that's part of the issue, that diversity is important because men and women, or individuals of different ethnicities or races, may somehow believe that they want to get something out of a field. And it's very difficult to know what the field is until you take it, until you have appropriate exposure to it. Because some fields, as I said before, are not taught in high school, or they're not taught well enough in high school. And even the fields that are taught in high school, like history, may not be taught the way they'll be taught in your college. But some fields simply aren't taught. So that's one reason why we should want to have more diversity, may be related to why we don't have enough diversity. But the other reason is, what do we get from diversity? And this is much larger a subject. And within economics, it's very clear that what we get from diversity is not simply having different views across the board, but the fact that women and men are tending to go into different parts of economics. If economics has 10 or 12 subfields, women are tending to go into one set of subfields, and men are tending to go into another set of subfields. And therefore, all these years not having enough women means that those subfields were populated by a much smaller group of individuals. And one of them happens to be health. Oh, absolutely. So I devised with a group of people, this undergraduate in economics, let's call it a program, and we came up with a large number of ways so that economics is seen as what it is. Economics is about people, and it's about various aspects of people's relationship to each other and to markets and to the world of economics. And so we devised it so that when freshmen or first-year students come in the door of universities, economics departments are able to give them information that demonstrate to them what economics is about and what economists do, that economists really do work with people. They work on inequality, they work on health, they work on economic development, and so on. And so there are various ways of doing this so that it is not believed by first-year students that within the social sciences, psychology deals with people and economics deals with just markets or money or stock markets and so on, that economics is about people. And if undergraduates realize that economics, I mean, saying economics is not about people to me is a joke, but that's what many, many people think, that economics is not about people. And if they do believe this, it's our failure not to tell them that that isn't true. One of the problems that we face in economics is that we create our subject as a set of courses that begins with economic theory. And economic theory then is pushing students away from the notion that economics is about people, because economics then becomes about a set of abstract ideas. And in the sciences, in physics, for example, it would be more accepted that physics is about abstract ideas, but economics really isn't about abstract ideas, and yet we're teaching them that economics is about these abstract markets. But a talented teacher should be able to blend the two. I would describe a good teacher as having an idea, a subject that you want to convey, and conveying it in a way that you could see in the eyes of a student is making them surprised and interested and inspired. And if you can't do that, you haven't reached the individual. So first of all, the title, Why Women Won, the article is a beginning exploration of mine. And a gift that we academics have is that when we have a question and we have some time, we can sort of go about trying to answer it. And my question was, I know where women are today, and I know where they once were. How did they get to today? And that's sort of why women won. That does not mean that women have won exactly what they should win, or that along the way all women won what they should have gotten. But it is a statement that where we are today is very, very different from where we were in my own lifetime. Not when I was born, not even when I was in college, but when I was in graduate school, and even when I was an assistant professor at Princeton. What women have today in terms of their legal rights is phenomenally greater. What their legal rights are in the workplace, what their legal rights are in the credit market, what their rights are with regard to their family, with regard to their name, with regard to their body, with regard to contraception, and the list goes on. What women's rights are in America, as well as in many parts in the world, are much, much greater. That does not mean that these rights are rights that they always have. That does not mean that these rights are the rights that they can easily begin to take advantage of, but that these are their rights.